then onto VC, then second VC, and so forth. And we are developing holographic display, which is one of the key enabling technologies for what we're going to talk about this morning, which is spatial computing, the interfaces to it, and augmented and virtual reality. So I just came back yesterday from Dubai, bit of a humble brag, for a conference called GITEC, which is basically the Middle East's version of CES. Huge tech conference. And basically everybody, regardless of their field, whether we're talking about AI or some fintech thing or health tech, everyone was talking about the metaverse. And I'm sure this is a concept everyone is quite familiar with. I'm sure some of you are also thinking, as I said, metaverse, bullshit. And that's okay, because a lot of this stuff was. A lot of this stuff is basically just hype built up to sell a unicorn, sell a vision. But we're a deep tech event here, so we're the guys who have to actually go and take that marketing stuff and go make it reality. And so today, that's what we're going to talk about. How we actually implement these things that the marketing is leading the way on, and how and the views of these fine people on that. So spatial computing as a term, I think, if you don't like metaverse, I think that's the alternative to it. This is a term coined almost 20 years ago out of MIT Media Labs by a guy called Simon Greenwald in his PhD thesis. And we can broadly think of it as how we integrate computing and data into the everyday world around us. But that presents a bunch of new challenges for interface and how we interact with it that haven't previously come up when working with our phone screens or with desktop computers. So to discuss this interesting topic today, I have Charles, Stephen, and Rick. And just to start with, I will now shut up and let these guys introduce themselves more fully about what they do and what brings them here today. Charles, would you like to kick us off?
Thanks very much. So I'm Charles Nduka. I'm CEO of emteq Labs. Our company is based in Brighton. It's been going since 2015. I have quite an unusual story. I'm a surgeon by background, a facial reconstructive surgeon, focusing on patients with facial paralysis. And for that operation, for the rehabilitation, we use a technology called EMG, electromyography. Some of you have heard of a company called Control Labs that Facebook bought that does a wrist-based EMG system. So EMG measures muscle signals to measure intentions and actions. What we did was to develop technology to embed that into XR headsets, VR with EMG, and glasses using a technology we developed and patented called optomyography. And that gives a very low latency ability to measure and track facial expressions within XR headsets, and it allows one to do two things. One, provide input, so you can do an action. So for example, notification comes in and you can literally just frown it away and it goes away, which is important because most companies are looking at trying to put your hand in your face and this kind of stuff, which is very, very cumbersome and clunky. But also allows one to personalize experiences in the same way that you meet somebody, you smile, they can actually see you in that context. And novel applications around things like biometric unlocking. So if you want to, as you have on your phone, Face ID, but we have Glass ID. You use your facial muscle movements, which are unique to each person, to interact with specific objects or unlock experiences.
Very cool. Stephen.
Yes, morning. So I'm Stephen Stewart. I'm the CTO at a company called Factory 42. We describe ourselves as an immersive technology and experience company. We're based in Somerset House here in London. Been going since 2016. And what we do is build consumer experiences. So we sort of talk about taking the science of stories, the magic of technology, and making what we call impact entertainment experiences for consumers, using a lot of different technologies across the sort of XR spectrum, spatial computing, haptics, spatialized sound. We're a team of about 35 strong. Earlier this year, we launched one of our latest products called the Green Planet AR experience, which I know a couple of people in the audience have been along to. So that was a collaboration, yeah, thank you. That was a collaboration with the BBC, with EE. It's the first time in the UK that a private 5G standalone network was used with streaming augmented reality content over to groups of people through a mobile headset. And so today's topic is very relevant as to how you interface with those kind of experiences in a naturalistic way.
Thanks, Stephen. And Rick?
Cool, thank you. So unfortunately, firstly, I'm not from the entrepreneur side. I'm from really the dark side, the investor side. So I'm partner in a fund called Speedinvest. So Speedinvest is one of the largest seed fund in Europe. The total AUM under management is roughly 1.6 billion. I'm basically the partner in the deep tech team responsible for leading and managing all the deep tech investment in Europe. And last year, we are one of the most active deep tech investors in Europe. We have done roughly 16 different deep tech deals. We do everything from software to the hardware side, and definitely human-computer interaction, which is related to the topic today, is one of our major focus area. And in the past several years, we actually have done already several hardware deals in this area. So we're happy to join the panel today to share our views.
Thanks so much. Okay, so bit of audience participation. By a show of hands, who's had a go in VR? Most all? Almost all. AR? Much less, yeah. That's pretty typical, right? So I think at this point, everyone has had a VR headset on their face, but AR still not really there. And just of interest, in the VR side of things, hands up if you had a good experience and you thought it was seamless and nice. Okay, significantly less, yeah. So I think that kind of justifies the panel, right? There's clearly a lot of work to be done there. And this falls into two main categories as I see it. You have how we engage our senses to perceive the digital world that we're using, whether that's virtual or augmented, and how do we provide feedback to the world to be able to manipulate it and control it as we see fit. So I'll turn to you first, Charles. So given that AR, VR presents these totally new challenges, what do you see as the critical interfaces that will allow it, hopefully more people in the audience say, yes, I had an enjoyable experience in VR?
So I think there are a few things. So one is obviously about comfort. So whenever we think about wearable technologies, there's always this trade-off between the downsides of using technology and the upside. So I wear glasses, quite a few people in the audience wear glasses. I don't like wearing glasses as such, but I wear them because they provide me with value. And the value outweighs the downsides. Of course, I'll use it. I wouldn't wear a thing on my face all the time, but if I want to go scuba diving, I've got no choice. If I want to go skiing, I wear something on my face. So with VR, it's always a question of can you provide enough value to offset the disadvantages. Once you're in the experience, and obviously the issues are around discomfort, around motion sickness, for example. That's largely been solved now with most modern devices. But then there are issues around just ensuring that the interactions are naturalistic. So we've gone from using things that are on our desk, normal keyboard and typing, to using things on the mouse. Now, touchscreen, much more seamless, less effort involved, less energy involved to actually do that interaction. And obviously, the next stage is now making it even more seamless, more intuitive. Unfortunately, VR is kind of taking a step backwards because we've gone back now to using your arm to do things, which is not very good for typing your input to put your password in or for any other interactions. And what needs to happen is that it becomes much less clunky, much less energy expensive, which is why we believe that facial expressions, which is a very natural way that we do things. When you want to engage with somebody, you smile and they smile back. When you want to express confusion or frustration, again, it's all done seamlessly without hardly any effort whatsoever. Obviously, voice is a really important input modality as well, but which is coming on, but that's something that will come on in time. So we believe that as the technology becomes more and more seamless, requiring less peripherals and more direct interactivity with something that feels and looks real, people will engage in that naturally. I mean, it is inevitable as let's progress in interaction, the metaverse.
Thanks. And so, Stephen, from a kind of content development perspective as well, like what tools, what technologies do you think will emerge that will make your job easier to make the UX experience smoother and nicer for people?
Yeah. So I think just picking up what Charles mentioned there about naturalistic interactions is a really key point. When you talk about the keyboard and mouse, you've got kind of 60 years of that as a modality, as an input into how you sort of interact with systems. I think already with the current state of the technology, for example, on the Green Planet AR experience, we took a lot of time thinking about how, given that we were doing the experience through a mobile phone, we didn't want to be touching, swiping, hitting lots of buttons because that breaks the immersion that you're getting from the experience. But already there's ways to bring that naturalistic approach. So we used the sort of microphone. You could blow into the phone to release some digital seeds. We had a section in the experience where you wanted to generate sort of lightning, so you were sort of swiping on the device. those are great examples, I think, of that naturalistic interaction, but also you're getting haptic feedback. I think that's really important. So as Charles mentioned, in VR, moving your hands around is good to a certain extent, but it's very difficult, even with hand tracking technology where it is today, to get that fine control or to get something that works robustly. And as a sort of content experience designing sort of side of things, if there's any edge case, it's not robust, immediately users are very attuned to that being a bad experience, and then you've lost them at that point. So that for me is just one of the key areas that we need to get right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Rick, you must see a lot of startups in this space. What's catching your eye at the moment?
Exactly. I think if you look at the past 2 years, particularly during pandemic, there's so many startups in this space coming out of it. So for us is, if you look at the past 10 years, how this something we call HCI, human-computer interaction, really evolved. At the beginning, we used desktop. That's how we interact with all those machines. Then later become like smartphone. And then last several years, voice becomes something very important. I think from our view, particularly from our research understanding, we really need to first question, we really need to understand is what kind of interaction we're expecting really for the next stage. And our answer is, we think it's going to be a combination of several different things. And according to the latest research, it's 70% when human interact with machine is actually image. So I'll give you an example. If you hear something, when you look at something, when you look at the image, actually give you a better interaction result. If you only hear things, it actually doesn't give you the better result. However, none of them can really work isolated. So you need a combination. And AR, VR is exactly the foundation for giving you the image interaction. But on top of that, we think you need to have AI, other capability to work together to give you the best result for those kind of interaction. So that's basically what we think in the long term is going to be more like combination of several things together.
Yeah, absolutely, cool. So I love what you're saying about the kind of facial interaction thing, because that seems like a very, very natural way of communicating with other people. And I guess when you have the Zuckerbergs of the world shouting, this is going to be the new form of social interaction. So can you dig a little more about that? Like, how could that work as part of a kind of an AR VR system?
Yeah, I like to think of these, this idea of interaction in layers. Okay, so the foundational layer is the identity layer, the who layer, because that establishes trust. And if we think about other ways that we currently interact, such as through LinkedIn or through email, the foundation layer is your identity, is your email address or your LinkedIn tag, whatever else. And with that, you have to have trust that I'm interacting with that person, because if it's not that person, then clearly you can't interact. You can't get past go. And this is the reason why we evolved this naked, relatively flexible face, unlike other animals. It's quite unique in the whole of evolution. Individuals who have no relation, no biological relation, interacting for prolonged periods of time. And the reason why we do that is through facial expressions. If we all wore masks, complete face masks that didn't move, it would be very difficult to interact with people. And so it's something that is so core to how we interact. Now, obviously, beyond that, you need to have a way of synchronizing people. All communication technologies, from the telephone, the telegram, and obviously early computers, they required that connection, and the connection had to be trusted, and that's about the identity, and then the location, and then beyond the location is what the person is doing. So you have to measure all those things to enable that flow of friction-free information. It's that allows us to build. Because otherwise, if without trust, everything breaks down, as you see when you have bots on the various platforms.
Of course, yeah.
So in AR, once you have that level of trust that I know that this entity I'm interacting with, be it an object or a person, a shop or an experience, can be trusted, then I'll be willing to interact more. If I don't trust it, I have high internal friction and I'll disengage. And it's the same reason what you're saying about various tracking technologies as well. If you reach out to reach something and it doesn't give you feedback, then you have no trust in that it actually exists.
Yeah, how much do we think that's going to be vital, having some kind of haptic feedback to be able to indicate to the user, yes, you have interacted with this virtual thing? And does it have to be touch, or could that be sound? Do we know of any studies that show what the minimum viable interactive element is?
I'm not sure about studies, but I think definitely the point that Rick made, it's the combination of those technologies are really, really key. So it's not just visuals, it's audio, it's haptics, maybe smell and time, although there's been sort of stuff done there that's
I've seen
had
a,
some
I've seen a
differing
couple of
results.
those demos. They are
Yeah, exactly,
they are
yeah.
early.
Yeah. But that thing of like hand tracking and having that sort of feedback, I think that's why, I mean, this week you'll have seen maybe the Meta Connect conference and some of the research that they showed around the EMG wrist, which I think came out of Control Labs.
Yes.
I mean, it's quite impressive what they're able to do right now. It's still far away from being a sort of consumer proposition, but I'm pretty sure you can see in some of the videos that they have their hand on a table and they're moving fingers, slightly. They're obviously getting some feedback from the table. That is really important. Hand tracking, where you're just moving something into space, it kind of goes against everything that your brain, I think, is set up to do.
Yeah,
So you're sort of fighting against that. And then I think another big aspect as to these technologies or interactions being sort of taken on is, do you feel comfortable doing it in public? Like, would you, like, in the sort of embarrassment test is sort of massive. So I think personally, voice is important, but if I was to ask people in the audience the last time in a sort of office environment they spoke to Siri and asked it to do something, I think that'd be much less than you being at home, a private environment doing it. So I think context, location is really, really important.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. Sorry, Rick, you want to go?
No.
Yeah, so that is the other element as well around privacy. If you went to a cash point machine, if people use those these days, and had to tell the PIN number, you wouldn't do it, would you? Yeah. There are times when you want to interact with people or things that you want it to be private. And so yes, Control Labs thing is useful to use a wrist device, but if you're riding a bicycle or on a motorbike, not going to work. So this is why we evolved this other dimension for interaction, which actually is really, really flexible. And babies know very quickly how to get what they want in the world without being able to speak from the caregivers, because without that they can't survive.
Excellent. So we've touched on it actually a little bit there, but I'm curious to hear, especially from Rick actually, is what are the so many things can ruin the experience, right, for any interaction. I think social acceptability is clearly quite a large one I hadn't really thought about myself. What are the other things when you're looking at companies? What are the absolute barn door things where you're just like, okay, nice technology, guys, but there's no way that's going to fly? Are there any particular obvious gotchas in any of these systems?
I think in this investment landscape, you have to divide into B2C and B2B world. So the use case is completely different. Like what you guys describe is mainly the individual customer, how they adopt the behavior to use those. For B2B enterprise world, slightly different. So for us, we're more focused on B2B side. And for enterprise, I think there's two things we are quite cautious. Firstly is on the content behavior side, whether people feel this is a repeatable, scalable use case. Because most of the time, you pretty much design a special use case for that particular industry. That's not something we like, because we don't see this as a repeatable use case that you can scalable to many different industries. And secondly, I think all those experience we're talking about, there's a fundamental problem is still in the hardware layer. So there's still a lot of like display problem, like iBox, all those field of view, all those things, they still need lots of hardware problem. So that's why we love to see the startup actually trying to solve one of those fundamental problems. Like for example, display is one of the biggest thing. I mean, LCD, OLED, and not micro LED. So as you guys also know, all the big tech companies are currently looking for micro LED solution, but there's no perfect solution yet. I mean, lots of people using different methodology try to produce those things, but who is going to really can produce this in a massive production environment? Still unknown yet. So that's probably the key things we're looking for, I would say, in general. However, it depends on investor, also depends on the use case. Sometimes, like for example, in the gaming industry, it's totally different world. So people, how they assess it is completely different. So it's quite hard to, unfortunately, we are not like a SaaS business, So all the KPI, all the metrics is already there, right? So you just send the investor all the KPI immediately, they can tell you. So I think overall, it still depends really on the use case and the potential, like the issues that you are trying to kill or trying to solve.
Okay. And do you like the startup to be able to articulate and spell out that use case from the ground up when you're hearing a pitch?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Actually, we quite like that. But the thing is, we're more deep tech, investors. So we're looking for fundamental, groundbreaking technology. But there are lots of application layer investor as well. So they're probably more looking for, okay, just tell us what exactly the pinpoint you're trying to solve using even existing AR, VR technology or whatever the application there, trying to solve the business problem. So it's really dependent on the investor sometimes as well.
Okay. Excellent. And so from Stephen, again, from your perspective as the guy on more the content end, what do you see as some of the, on the hardware side, I guess, what are the failings that make a system just unusable for a user?
So I think anything where you ask the user to do more work or any friction is a kind of non-starter, because if you think about it, sticking somebody, whether it's a VR headset or you put one of the latest AR glasses or an XR headset on somebody, they're already in an unfamiliar, slightly feeling embarrassed, nervous kind of state, emotional state. If then you ask them to work through 2 or 3 different steps just to get into the experience, well, you've kind of lost them at that point. So in some ways that makes it almost harder. You sort of really need to think about how you're going to onboard somebody, how you can let them acclimatize themselves to this new environment, not make them feel stupid. That's the main thing that I think users, if you feel stupid, you'll kind of disengage and then you've lost them. So I've seen many, sort of things in sort of different hardware incantations where you're, swiping on the side, or you've got to do a certain series of steps. Those are just barriers of friction that are really hard for a user to get over.
Yeah, I think taking analogies from the real world gives us a really nice indication of these things, because we don't need a lot of evidence. I mentioned scuba diving. That's a great example. I mean, anyone wearing a scuba diving outfit in the natural world, you look ridiculous. It's slippers on your feet, your skin tight thing, goggles on your face, this huge thing. But the experience of actually scuba diving itself is amazing. And so you will forego the embarrassment of being that and the discomfort of wearing this thing for that wonderful experience. And so it's a question of how can we ensure that the trade-off is there. Now, going back to what Rick said about the enterprise, that's totally understandable, because for enterprises, if you're trying to provide something that is going to increase your bottom line, business-wise, then you'll do that, which is why so often, well, almost always actually, certainly hardware technology starts off in the enterprise, because often there's a financial thing or a risk thing or a quality issue that has to be overcome, which would encourage them to overcome the other issues around things that are not quite being worked out. But obviously for the consimer, it doesn't work. It has to be
a discerning audience with very high expectations.
Yeah, which is why Apple await. They wanted to iron out the problems first, and may well even launch an enterprise device first, because it doesn't have to be as sleek, as small and light as a consumer device.
I think also just lightly, I don't know, it's like crystal ball gazing, but I would imagine Apple will release something that will just be about getting users used to wearing the glasses for an extended period of time. You've seen some sort of early projects that various tech companies have done. As you said, Charles, just wearing glasses all day, you kind of put up with it, but having a set of AR glasses on all day, that's just a barrier to get over, to get people used to that.
Yeah.
Never mind getting into amazing sort of content experiences, just that is quite a big barrier. So.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, the first Apple Watch did basically nothing.
Yeah.
It's just a heart rate monitor, not a very good one. But you're right, it does seed the way for people to get used to the concept before they start adding functionality and features.
Yeah.
So I think that might be the case. Although I wouldn't hold your breath for Apple releasing anything in at least see-through AR for quite some time.
Yeah.
That's still some way off. So it brings me to my last question is, for at least for the consumer sphere, do we think that the current state of tech is good enough to go out with, or do we think that there needs to be significant evolution in the approach we take to interaction with the spatial computing world? And I'm hoping the answer is yes, because that's what we're here for, right? It's deep tech. But Charles, what do you think?
So I think that's the initiatives being launched soon, I guess, from Google will be a great example of a use case. It's doing a very specific thing, allowing you to identify objects and do translation. That's a very narrow, specific thing you do with your phone already. It would be better to do with a device you wear in your head.
Yeah.
So wayfinding, navigate left, turn right, identify an object, and then simultaneous translation. That is a use case I would buy today. I wear glasses already. I keep taking my phone to navigate around. I'd be very happy not to take my phone and just to be able to have that navigation and have instant translation or object identification without something that looks too clunky. I think that the more advanced use cases around immersive displays, there's a problem that hasn't really been discussed, which is how do you avoid making somebody crash their car or their bike or whatever by suddenly putting up a thing that's going to fill their visual field? And it's fine with a phone, which occupies maybe 2 to 4% of your visual field because it's just down there. But when it's on your face, it's a big problem. The brain is designed to filter out as much as possible. 50 million bits of information are squashed down to 50 bits per second at the retina to reduce all of the cognitive load. And we've seen how Apple are trying to reduce the amount of notifications on the phone as a sort of a preamble to their glasses device. That has to be done in glasses to understand context and what you're receptive for. If I have something that tells me turn left, turn right when I'm actually trying to have a conversation, it's just not going to work. I'll just...
Absolutely, yeah. It's almost like someone should invent some kind of holographic display that allows objects to look like they're actually just normal objects in the real world, so they're not distracting.
Exactly.
Good concept. Exactly. Good concept. Exactly. What about yourself, Stephen?
So I think I'm pretty optimistic about the future and where we can get to. I think, like I was explaining before, right now, I think it is possible to make compelling, immersive experiences using the current state of the tech. So I described, using a mobile and the Green Planet AR experience. But I think what's interesting there is you're only going to get better as the technology improves. But I think you need to, even what we found right now, is you need to take a different approach to how you design the interface for that type of experience. Yeah. And it's not a direct sort of lift and shift of a mobile buttons, swipe, sliders idea. So I think companies like ourselves now who are trying to sort of tackle these challenges are sort of learning what it takes to do it with the current state of the tech, and then that's only going to get better over time because I think we sort of touched on AI, but that kind of contextual, personalized AI assistant that sits with you along with the EMG wristband, along with the glasses that understand the context. It's that layering together of all those pieces that will make that a really contextual experience. And I've heard of amazing research of using I think it was EMG, almost the user's intention before they actually move towards trying to press something. With that kind of technology, I could design a really simple interface that, depending on what your intention was, it would morph at the right time, and you weren't, had this sort of sea of buttons in front of you. So I'm kind of optimistic that it's only going to get better, with the caveat that spatial computing is really hard, and it's not a SaaS business or a mobile, or you need lots of different disciplines all coming together, but that's what makes it fun and interesting.
Excellent. And so just to round us off then, Rick, I guess for you, you're kind of counting on there needing to be work to be done so we can get all these companies going, right?
Yeah, so we have actually quite detailed investment thesis in this space. Probably I put separate into 2 categories. So I think on the VR side, there are already some very good state-of-the-art technology that people can use. It's really just depend on the content, on the customer behavior. However, on the VR side, I still believe there are 3 major hardware technology issues we are looking for actually. The first one is a display technology. Like I mentioned, LCD, OLED, we don't believe they are good enough for handling AR stuff. So we're looking for like micro LED type of solution. And the problem for micro LED is you need a new type of material science stuff to really, really cope with. Otherwise, how you can have a small pixel to have the RGB on your glasses to show things. So that's the first problem. Second problem is something called optical component problem. So one of the major problems, you guys also know, the VAC, vergence accommodation problem. So it's still, there's some methodology, but I don't feel it's good enough. And the last part is a system integration. So once you have a new display with a new optical component, you also need a little bit different system integration way, like your driver, your CMOS behind all of them. So basically this whole value chain still need to be established at the moment, particularly for AR. So that's also the things we are actually actively looking for as well.
Excellent. We should talk. Okay. I think we are actually out of time, but I'd love to hear some audience questions if there are any. Someone's got to have a question about metaverse, even if it's just to sort of troll the panel. No? Please.
Let's try. Just one want to touch on the feedback, and particularly for thinking about how humans may interact in the metaverse setting. So in the real world, we have this force feedback. So if you push something, they'll feel this feedback. Do you think that's realizable? And if yes, then how far such a more immersive interaction?
Yeah, I mean, I do. So whether that is, I think you can see with wearables, we are getting used to, AirPods in time with your wrist. I think there's probably ways there to sort of stimulate output as well as take input signals. So with that spatial understanding through whatever device you've got on your face, as you reach out and touch, that use of haptic feedback is enough probably to kind of trick your brain, I would suspect, that actually, I'm pushing up against something. So yeah, I can see a way that's how you're going to get that kind of interaction, that kind of feedback, which we know is so important.
Yeah, I mean, there's a company in Bristol that does this Ultra Leap. I think themselves now, and they do exactly that. They have acoustic modulators on a panel that try to create zones where your hand can interact. Now, for kind of an AR context, that's kind of hard, right? Because of things out there, and you want it to come here. I think the simpler solution is probably not to try and create an effect out there, but either have a thing around your wrist or a ring or something that buzzes to give you that sensation of something has happened. Will it feel like the thing? No. For that, we probably need to, I noticed Emil from BIOS is here, and he'll probably tell you could plant something in your brain that will then just give you the sensation, because I think eventually it's going to have to be more of an internal thing that just directly talks to your system that says, you're pressing against something. I don't think there's any real physics way of producing an external effect that can provide that sensation of touch.
I have a slightly different way of thinking about this. If we think about the history of interaction, how much time you spend interacting with objects over time, over the last, say, 100 years, or even 200 years, or even shorter time, is actually decreasing radically. Any task you can think about. So before it was maybe paying for something. You take out your wallet and you count out the coins and the pounds and you interact. And nowadays, it's touchless. Yeah, you don't touch it. In the past, when it came to making food, you had to literally put seed in the ground, grow it, water it, dig it up, cut it, cook it, everything, and then eat it. Whereas nowadays, you give it your phone, you make an order, what you want, it comes to you. Hardly any physical interaction. So the trend of the requirement for human interaction with physical objects actually is decreasing radically, and has done radically over the last 100 years, and will continue, that trend will increase. So I think some force feedback is important, but the degree of feedback that's required and the surface area of that interaction is diminishing rapidly. If you think about, so one of the companies you mentioned was Ultraleap and Ultra Haptics, in Bristol. And one of the use cases is within the car.
Yeah.
But actually, I drive a Tesla. I won't need to touch my car at all soon. I get in this car, it drives me where I want to go to. I don't need to interact with the objects on the screen, because when I get into the car, it knows where I'm going, it gets me there. All I have to do is open the door to get out again. So I think the requirement for force feedback will decrease radically over time.
Okay. Right, I am being given the eye to indicate that we have to wrap up. So thank you to the panel, and thank you all for listening. Hopefully that was interesting.